So Al and I ran over to Kiwi's day before yesterday and picked up the 6-pack satellite. Al drove it home. If you want to see a video on that, he posted it on his channel the day before yesterday. So he gets back here to the shop. I followed him and he says, well, how did the car feel? And he says, well, car drives great. So I said, well, how did it feel when you got on it? And he says, I didn't really get on it. I said, well, okay, well, let's fix that. So I jumped in the car here in the parking lot and I backed it all the way up and just flat punched it. And you know what? It just lit the tires up. No problem. No lack of power there at all. Then that's about getting towards the top of first gear, and just where you're about to shift, well, it goes away, those marks go away. That's how the power goes away. Car feels great on the initial hit, and then nobody home. All right, tuning issues. So real quick, before I even eyeballed anything, I says, well, let me make sure the secondaries are opening, you know, because you can only make so much power with 350 CFM 2-barrel on a 440. So I did the obvious thing. I pulled the vacuum line off, held the throttle open, and sucked on it, and confirmed that we do have secondary operation. The diaphragms are good, everything's fine there. So why doesn't this thing have any oomph? Where is the power? I also noticed that it seemed like it had a light ignition miss. Not a misfire per se, but it had that how can I explain to you? It had that weak ignition feel, right? So, all right, so just keep that in mind as we go forward. So I parked the car, did other things, and this is the first time I'm really getting a chance to assess it and see what we have to do, what has to be addressed before we can really try to put a super tune on this. And to be perfectly honest with you, the way this car responded when I flat punched it out there tells me that it really doesn't need very much in the way of a super tune. It just needs refinement. The car really feels solid. And one of the things I suspect, one of the reasons I suspect it's already been kind of gone through, is that the vacuum advance is plugged off on this, and there's no vacuum advance line to the distributor, which tells me that more than likely somebody's already been in this distributor and curved it. It might be set up for performance already. I don't know. We'll find out. But like I said, let me show you some of the issues that we're going to have to fix and why we're going to have to fix them. And okay, so let's start with the most obvious thing of all, the plug wires. Okay, so unless you've tried to route plug wires on a 440, even a 383, but a 440 in a B body with headers, you cannot appreciate the difficulty of getting all of these wires to run to where they're supposed to and be neat and everything else. So we're going to have to straighten that out. We also have one burnt wire back here. I can see it, but that's burned through. So, and I don't know if any of the others are like that. These wires are also laying right on the steering shaft, so every time you turn the steering wheel, it's rubbing against the wires. So that's no good thing. Just a tip for anybody who's routing plug wires on one of these things: the wires for cylinders 7 and 8 in the back always run over the top of the valve cover and around the back of the engine, and you plug into you get the spark plug from behind at the back, and then the number, this one here, this is an odd one. This has to come out this way. The other two in the front go from underneath, and then pretty much all of them, these 3 front cylinders go from underneath on this side, and then you run around the back for the rear cylinder. So, all right, I know it's not a big deal, but it is a big deal. It has to be done. It has to be addressed. Okay, so one of the things I noticed was, as Al was driving the car, as I was following him, we get an occasional puff of black smoke come out from under the car. It wasn't steady, and it wasn't like he was accelerating. He was just driving along, really, and you get an occasional puff of black smoke, and I didn't understand why exactly. So here's what we got here. The choke does not open on this thing fully. So at some point, somebody replaced the choke itself, but we have a broken bolt at the front, so this thing is just flopping around. And I haven't put a wrench on this yet, but this bolt here is just loose. So instead of the spring on the choke acting on the blade here, it's just raising and lowering raising and lowering the body. So we've got to fix that. That's an obvious problem. Now remember I said about the ignition, I felt something like, yeah, just like it wasn't, you know what I mean? I can't explain. It's a seat of the pants thing. So as I'm looking this over, so this is the connection that I found on the coil. Okay, I mean, yeah, that's a problem. We need to fix that. The second thing is that the coil on the 6-pack cars, the coil gets mounted over here. They've got it mounted here. It's not a deal breaker. It's nothing weird. You know, it's just not the way it's supposed to be. And also the coil is just flopping around, and it looks to be just a regular standard Chrysler coil. So we're going to do something with that for sure. Not sure exactly what's going on here with the electronic, because it's got an electronic ignition conversion, so I'm not really sure what's going on here, and I'll just go through the wires and make sure that they're all the way it's supposed to be. So that's this side of the engine. You see the fuel lines have been replaced by these snazzy braided steel lines. Very nice, very nice. And that's it. On this side. Now on this side I found what's probably the biggest culprit of them all. Okay. On a 6-pack and a Hemi car, they use unique throttle brackets. The 6-pack, both of the 6-pack and the Hemi car, use a short throttle bracket that mounts right to these 2 points on the intake manifold. Well, this one here is using the stock 4-barrel style one, and that's fine. That's fine. You can adapt them and modify it a little bit to work. It's not the factory setup, but it can work. But this can't work. So the stud right here, see okay, so here's the throttle cable, here's the metal part of the throttle cable that gets clamped to this. Well, we're barely getting half throttle the way this is set up. So we're gonna have to either find another bracket or drill this one out and put a nut and bolt, and we're gonna have to find a clamp for this. So either way, that's got to be fixed. So, and that's probably why this thing was so strong when you first hit it, and then just fell on its face afterwards, because it had no throttle. You know, that's it. You can only go so far. Overall condition of the motor, I'll tell you what, it sounds good. The motor sounds good. The exhaust sounds good. It's got a small cam in it. I'm going to say it's probably in the range of like a street Hemi grind cam. It's nothing hairy, but it seems like it's a well-matched, well-balanced. I don't know what converter is in here. It's got a 355 gear. It drives like it's a very well-mannered car, right? No question about that. Now, one problem that we're going to have, and I got to talk to the owner of this car about this, is that this engine, I don't know what it's from, but it originally had air conditioning. And I know this because these are the AC brackets for the alternator. It mounts the alternator further back than it does on a non-AC application. So this is the right water pump, or the right water pump pulley for a non-AC, and it's got the right bottom pulley for non-AC. But because these brackets here mount the alternator, I'm going to say probably a ½ inch behind this. I don't know if you could see it on the, yeah, I guess you can. The belt is riding on an angle. So within, you know, just a few hundred miles, maybe 1,000 miles or so, that belt is toast. It's gone. Now, it's not just a simple matter of spacing the alternator forward, because the bottom bracket on these is a relatively elaborate setup, where it bolts to the water pump over here, and then there's a bracket that goes underneath, and it bolts to the motor mount ear underneath. You can't see any of that from over here, but that's something that definitely needs to be addressed. I mean, I can cobble something together to space it where it kind of should be, but I would much rather replace this setup with the correct bracketry and get this squared away, so he's not going to have an issue with that in the future. I think that's pretty much it. It's a bunch of small things. I don't really think that this car is going to need very much to really turn on. Like I said, it feels good. It feels very old school. It feels very solid. But it's a lot of little things that add up. The only other thing I'm going to do tonight before I leave this thing is I got to find the timing marks on them and confirm that we have number 1. It looks like there's a brand new set of plugs in there, but it's pointless trying to do a plug reading on it now because we have to just get everything functioning and running, set up the way it's supposed to be before you even look at the plugs. But it's got a new set in there, and that's it. Kiwi's out of town for a few days, so this thing will be parked until he gets back, and then we'll go from there. We'll see where we go from there. The other thing too is you're trying to set up a 6-pack setup, and this is important for any vacuum secondary carburetor. But if you're trying to set up a 6-pack setup to get the secondaries tuned correctly, you really should have the air cleaner housing on here, because the air cleaner housing affects the vacuum signal to the secondary pods. So if we maximize, if we tune the springs, we put the right springs in here to get the right opening point without the air cleaner on it, it can and probably will change when the air cleaner is on it. There's a good chance it'll get a bog because the vacuum secondaries, the vacuum pods, will get a stronger signal because it's all enclosed as opposed to being open like this. So I would like to try to get an air cleaner on here before we do anything as far as getting this, finding the right secondary opening point and getting the tune on it that way. So that's it. I'll give you a quick update on this. Probably won't see anything on this car for at least another week or two, but she's here, and in the meantime I'll pick away at those little things that are wrong with it, and then we'll go from there. So that's it. I'll see you tomorrow.